Cover Up Chapter 7 Unsportsmanlike Conduct. The field was almost empty when Stevie walked back down the tunnel. A number of TV crews were still doing stand-ups, but all the players and team and league officials were long gone. Stevie noticed that Susan Carroll and Whitsitt were doing a stand-up in front of one of the goalposts, the one right in front of the tunnel he had to walk through to get back to the media area. Tal Vincent was standing a few feet behind the two cameras, and for an instant, Stevie thought about walking over to say something to him. He decided against it, though. He had already won the battle. No need to start a war. He walked to his right as he passed the area where US TV was set up, and noticed that a makeup woman was redoing Jamie Whitsitt's forehead while Susan Carroll waited. She didn't even glance in his direction as he walked by. Unfortunately, Vincent did. "Hey, Stevie!" he yelled. Apparently, he was taking the approach that if you lose one battle, you start another one. Stevie stopped and waited till he walked up to him. "I don't care if some PR guy invited you or not. I don't want to see you around any of our shoots the rest of the week," Vincent said. "What makes you think I have any interest in your shoots?" Stevie said. "Do you think I'm going to steal questions like, 'Dude, Harvard, what's that all about?'" Vincent reddened slightly. "Look, I know you're jealous of Jamie. He's got your job and your girlfriend. Deal with it." Stevie had an urge to tackle Vincent, who wasn't much bigger than he was, but resisted. Instead, he changed his subject. "Look, Tal, Eddie Brennan made a fool of you out there," he said. "Deal with it." He started to turn away, but Vincent grabbed his arm. Stevie stiffened and pulled away. "Don't you touch me," he said, his voice, now raised, turning back to face Vincent, who was completely red-faced. "I'm going now. I can't wait to give Bobby Kelleher a note about what Brennan did to you. You put that in the paper and And what? You'll fire me? And I'll never speak to you again." The speaker was Susan Carroll. She had dropped her mic and left her stand-up position to walk over to the argument. Her arms were folded and she was glaring at Stevie. Her drop-dead smile was nowhere in sight. "What?" Stevie said. "Are you defending him?" "He was doing what the network people wanted him to do," she said. "He told me that a few minutes ago. Mike Shoup doesn't want you around this week, and Tal is just following orders. You don't humiliate someone for that." Stevie could feel his heart racing. He couldn't believe what was happening. "Oh, but it's okay for him to humiliate me because the network told him to do. Because it's his job to be an arrogant—" "Stop it, Stevie. It's not the same." "You really have lost it," he said. "Do you hear yourself defending this suck-up, 2-bit TV producer who now has twice tried to pick a fight with me?" He realized his voice was shaking with anger and emotion. Susan Carroll looked like she might cry. "I have work to do," she said. "Yeah, work," Stevie said. "That's some great journalism you've got going on with the Pretty Dude and Dudette show. Very impressive." Susan Carroll stared at him for a long second as if measuring a response. "Go to hell, Stevie," she said finally, and turned to walk away. "Got a minister's daughter to tell you to go to hell," Tal Vincent said, the sneer returning to his face. "Impressive." Stevie knew Vincent had a point, which made it even worse. Chances were good that Susan Carroll had never told anyone to go to hell in her life. He didn't respond to Vincent's final gibe. It was time to leave the building. As soon as he turned his cell phone on, it started to ring. "Did you get Brennan?" Bobby asked. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, fine," Stevie said, trying not to sound glum. He must have failed. "What's wrong?" Kelleher said. "Nothing important," Stevie said, not wanting to get into it. "I'll fill you in later. I'm going back to my room to write." "You want to eat first?" Stevie glanced at his watch. It was 12:30 and he hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, but he didn't feel like talking to anyone at the moment. "I think I'll just order some room service. I'm a little tired from staying up late last night." "That's fine. Call me in a few hours and I'll take a look at your story before you send it." Stevie agreed and hung up. He was tempted to call Susan Carroll's cell to try to talk, but he knew it was a bad idea. He walked back across the street and into the lobby of the Marriott, which was packed, wall to wall. He put his head down and was trying to maneuver his way through the crowd when he heard someone calling his name. "Steve! Hey, Steve! Steve Thomas! He turned and saw a short, middle-aged man with wavy brown hair and glasses approaching. Randy Merkin, he said, working his way through a couple of Men in Dreams jerseys. I work for Sporting News Radio. I'm glad I spotted you. We'd love to get you on the air. A lot of radio stations sent people to events to broadcast live. Most of them set up shop at one of the downtown hotels and sent producers, like Merkin, Stevie presumed, in search of celebrities they could grab and put on their shows. He was mildly flattered to be asked, but at the moment Stevie wanted three things: to be alone, to order something to eat, and to write his story. I'm really busy right now, to tell you the truth, he said. I have to write a story, then I've got stuff to do for CBS. You're working for CBS now? Merkin said. Wow, I didn't know that. Actually, I wasn't thinking about now. I was thinking about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Your old pal, Chip Graber, is supposed to come on with us, then I thought it might be fun for you. Chip's here? Stevie said. What's he doing here? He's promoting a new video game. The Timberwolves play tomorrow night in Chicago, so the team gave him a day off to come here to do promo stuff. Everyone in the world comes to the Super Bowl to pitch products. Stevie had read about that, but didn't quite get it. He and Susan Carroll had kept close tabs on Graber's career since the Final Four. After hitting the shot to win the championship in dramatic fashion, Graber had been taken with the 12th pick in the draft by the Minnesota Timberwolves, his hometown team. A lot of people had been surprised that he wasn't picked sooner, but some teams had been scared off by his size. He was 5'11", standing up very straight. The Timberwolves, a team struggling to draw fans, had happily taken a local hero, and the pick had proved to be golden. Graber was averaging 15 points and 7 assists in his rookie year as the starting point guard, and, as might be expected when a good-looking white kid makes it in the NBA, he had become a marketing star. With all that had gone on in recent days, Stevie had lost track of where and when the Timberwolves were playing. Now he knew. Well, I'd love to see Chip, he said. Just come to the second floor at 4 o'clock then, Merkin said. You'll see radio stations up and down the hallway. We're at the far end once you turn the corner, just beyond the escalator. He handed him a card. Any problems, just call my cell. So Radio Row is here? Stevie asked. Merkin laughed. One of the Radio Rows is. There's another one at the Hyatt and another one at the Convention Center. There are probably close to 200 stations here. Wow, Stevie said, not caring that he was using that word again. That's a lot more than the Final Four, isn't it? Probably double, at least, Merkin said. So, 4 o'clock okay? Stevie thought for a second. If there was anyone in the world he was comfortable talking to about what was going on with Susan Carroll, it was Chip Graber. The three of them would always be bonded by what they'd gone through in New Orleans. He knew Chip emailed regularly with Susan Carroll, just as he did with Stevie. I'll be there. He worked his way to the elevator, aware that he was actually smiling. The thought of seeing Graber had certainly picked up his spirits. Once he was settled in his room, and had ordered some food, it didn't take him long to write the story. Darren and Eddie's stories of high school glory and friendship were so great he could have easily written 2,000 words. Kelleher had told him anything beyond 1,000 words would get cut no matter how good it was, so he tried to be disciplined and picked only the best material. It wasn't easy. His first version was about 1,400 words. It took him almost as long to get the story down to 1,033 words as it had taken him to write 1,400. It was nearly 3 o'clock by the time he called Bobby to tell him he was finished. I'll be right down, Kelleher said. He was at the door a minute later and sat in front of Stevie's computer reading the story, occasionally pausing to laugh or nod. It's good, he said. Very good. Now you need to cut another 200 words out of it. What? Stevie said. You said I had 1,000 words. I know. The desk called before and said they could only take 800 from you today because a feature on the home life of the Ravens cheerleaders came in long. Come on. True story. Look, Stevie, the newspaper business isn't perfect either. We screw up just like the TV people do. I'll call them back and tell them you got Brennan and no one else did on this topic. It may help, but you have to be prepared for the answer to be no. He was half right. The desk offered an extra 100 words. Now, he said, plopping down on the armchair next to the bed, tell me what you were so upset about when I called before. Stevie filled him in on both run-ins with Tal Vincent and Susan Carroll's reaction. Let it go, Kelleher said. She's got a lot of TV people spinning her head around, clearly. But she's very smart, and all her instincts as a human are outstanding. She'll come around. I know that's easy for me to say, but it wasn't that long ago that I was 14, and I do remember what that was like. Stevie decided not to argue. He didn't doubt that Bobby remembered what it was like, but he was sure that Kelleher would have been just as depressed if the first girl he'd ever really cared about had told him to go to hell. So instead, he told Kelleher he had to go downstairs to do Sporting News Radio with Chip Graber, and asked if he wanted to come along. Kelleher said he'd love to see Graber, but needed to finish writing his column on Little Donnie. They walked to the elevator bank together, Kelleher going up, Stevie going down. When Stevie got to the second floor, he was confronted with a mob unlike any he had ever seen. It wasn't as if he hadn't been in big crowds or at major events before, but this was a new level. People were crowding around the desks and small podiums where each radio station had set up headquarters as if the stations were handing out money. He picked his way through the alleyway that had been created between the desks and podiums, pausing every few steps as another famous face went past. As he rounded the corner near the escalator that Merkin had described, he heard someone yelling, "Coming through! Clear the way, please!" Bearing down on him were several very large men. Behind them was Michael Jordan. The burly man veered to the right where Stevie saw a banner that said ESPN Radio. Behind a glass partition, he could see Dan Patrick, the Sports Center anchor, talking into a microphone and waving at Jordan, who was apparently going to make Patrick's show his next stop. People were shouting Jordan's name, sticking pieces of paper as close as they could get to him, given that there were bodyguards in front of him and behind him. Jordan just kept walking. "Wonder what he's selling," Stevie said aloud, forgetting that he was surrounded by people. "A motocross team," someone right behind him said. He turned, and much to his surprise, he saw Michael Wilbon, co-host of Pardon the Interruption, and a long-time Jordan friend. "A what?" "Michael bought a motocross team last year," Wilbon said. "He's trying to drum up interest in the sport. He just did Jim Rome, and now he's doing Patrick. Then he's going to WFAN. "What are you doing here?" Stevie asked. "Needed a column," Wilbon said. "Michael Jordan selling motocross is definitely a column." He wasn't wrong about that. "You're Steve, right?" Wilbon said. "Steve Thomas? We met in New Orleans. You're with your friend who is 13 but looks 18. Susan, right?" "Susan Carroll," Stevie said. "She's 14 now and a TV star." "Yeah, I know," Wilbon said. "But being a TV star is vastly overrated." He turned towards Patrick's interview area. Stevie waved goodbye and walked a few steps down the hall until he reached another large banner with Sporting News Radio logo. Merkin was standing there next to Chip Graber. When Graber saw Stevie approaching, he raced up to him and wrapped him up in a hug. "Look at you," he said. "You look like you've grown 6 inches since New Orleans." Then Graber grinned. "So how tall is Susan Carroll these days?" 8'6", Stevie answered. Graber laughed. "Don't worry, you'll catch up." At that moment, Susan Carroll's height was the least of Stevie's worries. Merkin introduced Stevie to Tim Brando, the network's midday host. The interview was, for the most part, routine. Chip talked about the video game and adapting to life in the NBA. Brando asked Stevie about being let go by USTV. Stevie was happy to be able to report that even though USTV didn't think he was pretty enough to share a set with Susan Carroll, CBS thought him enough to hire him for the week. "That's a nice comeback," Brando said. "Well," Stevie said, "I may not be able to sing like Jamie Whitsitt, but I can complete a whole sentence without using the word dude." That got a big laugh from Brando and Chip. When they were finished, and Merkin had thanked them, Chip walked him back down the hallway. There were so many celebrities walking around that Chip, dressed around in one of his disguises, a droopy sweatshirt and a baseball cap, went completely unnoticed. "Look over there," Chip said, pointing to a corner where a gaggle of reporters, minicam operators, and photographers were trying to get close to someone who looked familiar, though right at that moment Stevie couldn't place him. "Tom Cruise," Chip said, seeing the puzzled look on Stevie's face. "He's got that movie deal with the owner of the Redskins." They paused at the escalator. "So, are you really okay?" Chip asked. "Oh, yeah," Stevie said. Chip looked at him closely. "I'm not so sure. How has Susan Carroll been with all this?" "Oh, she's fine with it," Stevie said, before he realized how sarcastic his tone was. Chip smiled. Let me guess. She likes what's it or wits it. Uh-huh. She thinks I'm being mean because I made up the fact that he's a dope. Made fun of the fact that he's a dope. Chip was smiling now. Uh-huh. And you're not being extra hard on him because you're jealous? Well, you two will work it out, Chip said. You're good together. He looked at his watch. Damn, he said. I've got to meet some store to sign autographs. This is more work than playing. He gave Stevie a hug. Hang in there, kiddo, he said. With that, he was gone, heading down the escalator. Stevie hoped he wouldn't have to hang in for too long. Dinner wasn't all that different from Stevie's walk through Radio Row. Bobby and Tamara took him to a place called St. Elmo's Steakhouse, which Kelleher explained was the place to eat in Indianapolis and one of the best steakhouses in the country. The minute they walked in the door, it was clear Kelleher was right. Wayne Gretzky, arguably the greatest hockey player in history, was sitting at the bar with Mario Lemieux, who had to be in the top 5 himself. What are they selling here? Tamara asked when she spotted them. Fantasy hockey camps, Bobby said. As they were led back to their table, Stevie's head was on a swivel. He spotted Jim Nance and Phil Simms, his new colleagues, sitting at a large table, and Fred Couples and Davis Love, the golfers, seated right behind them. Okay, Tamara said after Bobby stopped to say hello to Couples and Love. What are they selling? Nothing, Kelleher said. They like football and they're buddies with Nance. As they followed the hostess, who came to a door being guarded by several large men. Who's in there? Stevie asked the woman as they turned around the corner and went into another room that was much larger than the one they had been in. Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, she said in a hushed voice. Did you know Jordan was into motocross? Said Stevie. No. Really? On instructions from Kelleher, Stevie ordered a shrimp cocktail. When he tasted the sauce, his eyes began to water, and he thought he might faint. Oh my God, he gasped. Bobby and Tamara laughed. They had seen this before. Want to stop? God, no, Stevie said, recovering. I might want seconds. You wouldn't live through seconds, Kelleher said. The porterhouse steak Stevie ordered was equally good. Throughout dinner, more celebrities passed by, some of them stopping to say hello to Kelleher and Mearns. A few recognized Stevie. Don't let the TV people get you down, counseled David Wright, the New York Mets star third baseman. Good things happen to good people. You'll be fine. Stevie realized it would now be tough for him to root for Wright to strike out when the Phillies played the Mets once the season began. You're good on the air, Bob Costa said, pumping his hand after chatting with Kelleher and Mearns. But I'm not sure you won't find writing more gratifying. That was interesting, coming from a person who had made millions on TV. By the time dinner was over, Stevie's spirits had lifted considerably. He was about as full as he could ever remember being, and he was amazed by all the famous people they had encountered. As they were leaving, Tamara, who seemed less impressed with all the stars than anyone, stopped dead in her tracks. Bobby, look, she hissed, pointing at a small man with curly, graying hair sitting in a corner. Kelleher's eyes went wide, too. Jeez, I never thought I'd see him here, he said. Big sports fan? Tamara said. Who? Stevie demanded as they walked out the door. Who is that? You don't know? Tamara said. That's Billy Joel. Billy who? Stevie said. Who does he play? Not who. What? Piano. Then it came to him. He'd heard one of his songs when his father categorically refused to change the station in the car. You guys like him? Like him, Kelleher said. The man's a genius. Time to go home, Stevie thought. Kelleher and Mearns were morphing into his parents. The long day had worn him out, and he went right to bed once he got back to his room. He set his alarm for 7 o'clock because there was a message from someone at CBS asking that he report to the CBS work area at 8 to discuss his assignment for the day. Kelleher had already suggested they meet for breakfast at 7:45. Stevie decided he'd go down a few minutes earlier than that and tell them he had to leave ahead of them to walk to the dome. He fell asleep quickly, and when the alarm went off, he was still in a deep sleep. He couldn't believe it was already morning. He forced his eyes open, stunned that it was already 7 o'clock. He was reaching to turn off the alarm when he noticed the time. 1:42. He sat up. trying to shake the cobwebs from his head. That was when he realized it wasn't the alarm going off, it was the phone that was ringing, not the clock. He fumbled for the phone in the dark, suddenly fearful that maybe something bad had happened at home. "Hello?" he said, finally getting the receiver to his ear. "Stevie, we need to talk." What? He was about to say, "Who is this?" when his ears made connection to his brain. It was Susan Carroll, sounding both breathless and a little bit hysterical. "Need to talk? When? Isn't it the middle of the night?" "Yes, it is, and we need to talk now." "What room are you in?" Now Stevie was awake. "Room? Me?" "Yes, Stephen, you. What room are you in? I'm on my way there right now." "Now?" he said, awake but still somewhat stunned by the call and the conversation. He was trying very hard to remember his room number. Finally he got it. I'm in 1248, he said, actually proud of himself for remembering. The line went dead. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. Stevie sat there looking at the phone. He rubbed his eyes, wondering if he had been dreaming. Apparently not. It was 1:45 in the morning and Susan Carroll Anderson was on her way to his room. He had to be dreaming. Except he was now wide awake.